Welcome back to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with me, Jen Curtis. This week, I want to talk about the truth about getting lean, because I feel like there are some big misconceptions about this. And I often talk to women who are quite lean and want to get leaner and are getting stuck. So I wanted to make a podcast to clear up some of the misconceptions and talk about the reality of what you need to do if you fit this category. So first of all, let's just kind of define the person who this podcast is for. So you're already very lean, right? That's the sort of person I'm talking about, where you're already very slim. You already have a healthy BMI. You already have a healthy body fat percentage. But you want to get that little bit leaner, right? You want to lose 2 or 3 kilos, 5 pounds, something like that. And you just want to see a bit more definition and just get rid of that little bit of extra body fat. And you probably also are in the very low 20s when it comes to body fat percentage. So obviously not all of you will have a way of reliably measuring body fat percentage, but you're probably not more than 22 or 23% body fat. Remembering that the leanest that women can get really without fucking up their menstrual cycles is about 17 or 18% body fat. You can't really get lower than that. When you get lower than that, you lose your period. So you're in that kind of low 20s, maybe 21, 22% body fat, and you want to get a little bit lower. So if that describes you, then this podcast episode is for you. Oh, also, you're already lifting weights, you're already pretty strong, and you're already pretty muscular, okay? That's also really important. If you're not currently lifting weights and you just want to lose a couple more pounds of body fat or whatever, you probably don't need to lose weight at all. You probably need to recomp, you probably need to build some muscle. Now, if you build 3 kilos of muscle mass, you will lose, and stay the same weight, you'll lose 3 kilos of fat mass. Okay. So if you're not lifting weights, then this also doesn't apply to you, because what you actually need to do is just start lifting weights and start getting stronger and start building some muscle. And then you'll probably get the physique that you're looking for. Okay. So now that we've defined who we're talking about, I want to talk to you about the reality of what it takes to get a little bit leaner. And part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is this is pretty much where I'm at right now. I got down, so I've just had my 3rd baby, right? I had Ronnie 9 months ago, and I've been like really on it in terms of fat loss right from the beginning. And I've really enjoyed it, right? I started out just above 70 kilos after, about a month postpartum, just over 70 kilos. So that was sort of where I started my journey at. I very easily got down to about 64 kilos. That happened within the first 6 months. And now these past 3 months, I've basically been trying to get down from 64.5 kilos down to about, my goal is to get below 62. And it's been coming down gradually. And actually yesterday I had, I weighed in at 62.9 kilos. So this was my first time dipping below 63 kilos. So I'm getting there, but it is taking a long time. And my own experience of this is that, getting down into being pretty slim, for me, which is about 64, 65 kilos, that's one thing. And then getting down those last 2-3 kilos down to being very lean, that's a totally different beast. And it's way harder for a whole bunch of reasons. And I see a lot of women in my work. I have clients who fit this description. But I also talk to women online who are also trying to get lean and struggling with similar things. So I want to talk about what is so much harder about getting down to this. Like if you've gotten down, if you're already that slim and you're pretty lean, what you've probably noticed is what worked for you to get down to that level isn't working anymore, right? You keep doing the same thing. You've got most of your meals sorted out. You're eating pretty well. You're working out really hard. You're lifting heavy weights, and you, for the most part, have your calories in check, and you are having a bit of fun stuff here and there, but it's just not working anymore. You're just plateauing and you're staying the same weight for like 6 months, a year, whatever, and it's just not coming down. And what you did to get down to this level is no longer working to keep going down the last 2 kilos. Now, something that I tell people a lot is that you won't have to reduce your calories. Just keep doing this and you will eventually get down to the weight you want to be at. This is true up to a certain point. But then when we're talking about the last 2 kilos and you want to get exceptionally lean, this advice doesn't apply anymore. And as I said before, what you were doing before isn't working and you're not getting any lower. So I want to talk about why that is and what you have to do to get that extra little bit. Now, the main thing that you need to realize is that if you want extraordinary results, you are going to have to do extraordinary things. Okay. So the fact that you've gotten to a point where, you just work out, you don't track your calories, you eat sensibly, you have some wiggle room, but you're still quite lean, that is a miracle, right? That's amazing. You're already in the top 1%. You are most people's dream body, okay? And the fact that you get to do it while also having some fun food and some alcohol and maybe, going a little bit over the top at the weekend, loosening up at the weekend a bit. The fact that you get to do those things and still be relatively lean, that's amazing, right? And it's a really great place to be in where you can stay there the rest of your life. And that is kind of balance, right? Where you are watching what you eat, you're trying not to overdo it most of the time. You have this kind of 80-20 approach to it. So you have a bit of the foods that you enjoy, you have ice cream with your kids, and you have some fun foods, and you have some alcohol and things like that. That is sort of balance. You're getting 80% of your food from nutrient dense whole foods, you're getting enough protein, all of that kind of thing. That's a great balanced place to be. But if you want to get very lean, you can't really do that anymore. You have to go beyond the kind of 80-20 approach. And the reason is a few things. As we get down towards a very lean physique, right? I'm talking below 20% body fat. The body does start to fight back in terms of hunger and energy levels. So you have to be very, very strategic with your approach. You can't just kind of wing it and just hope for the best anymore. Again, if you've managed to lose a lot of weight and get pretty lean by just having an 80-20 approach and not being too, obsessive about anything, it's a really nice place to be. And the temptation is to think that that is what's going to get you down to the next level, but it won't. To get down to the next level, you need to be more strategic. You have to have more of a plan. And there's certain things that you can't get away with anymore. So I'm going to go through each of the things that you have to then tighten up, because I often find that there's a lot of people posting on Instagram of sort of, who have beautiful, amazing, really lean, really perfect physiques, or what people are, and they make out as though, I do this with a balanced diet, and I do this while also enjoying ice cream and also enjoying croissants or whatever. And that's great for them, but most people are not going to be able to get that lean with that kind of approach. And we kind of have this cultural narrative that it's really important to have some of the things you enjoy, and it's important to not restrict yourself too much. And that is true, right? And that is a good place to be. But again, if you want to get leaner, that's not completely true. You do actually have to restrict yourself a little bit. And that 80-20 approach doesn't quite work anymore. So I'm going to go through the main pitfalls that I see in this population and the things that you need to change in order to get to the next level of leanness. So the first most common thing that I see is women who are kind of undereating and underfueling themselves, and then kind of overdoing it a bit in the evening. It's kind of backfiring. And sometimes it's quite bingy behavior. And sometimes it's just kind of eating too much in the evening. But they're really consistently underfueling themselves during the day. They're eating things like protein bars, and they're living off coffee, and they're having like a bit of fruit or a bit of like, you know, a snack bar or a low calorie bar or some granola, and like they're chronically under eating during the day. But then in the evening, the hunger is built up so much that then they do end up having a big dinner, and they do end up having some dessert and things like that. And this is, again, a lot of women become quite slim doing this. I don't think it's a good approach, and it's not how you should be eating anyway, especially if you are very active. You should be fueling yourself with well-rounded meal. I often say to people, like, it could be fruit and yogurt in the morning, it could be a sandwich at lunchtime, fruit and yogurt in the afternoon, and then a sensible sized dinner, right? But you are spreading your calories out throughout the day, and you're fueling yourself on protein-rich foods, trying to get lots of fiber in. You will be probably having carbohydrates because you're very active, but you're eating enough throughout the day so that you're not getting like absolutely famished and starving hungry, and you don't end up with this kind of residual hunger in the evening that you can't get rid of, and then you kind of pick at things. So this is one of the main things that I see happening. And a lot of women who fit that description, they're really scared to start eating in a way that fuels them properly throughout the day, because they say, oh, but I like to eat most of my calories in the evening, and I tend to get a bit snacky in the evening, and I tend to want to have something sweet in the evening. So if I don't save up my calories during the day, if I eat too many calories during the day, then I'm gonna end up having too many calories. But this is a kind of a backwards way of thinking about it, and they're getting trapped in a loop of chronically under eating during the day, and then you getting starving hungry in the evening, and again a kind of residual hunger that you can't get rid of, and then you get very snacky and you can't control yourself. The first thing that you have to do, if this is you, is you have to start to spread your calories out during the day. So if you're aiming for, I don't know, 1,600 calories, for example, you can't just save up half of those calories for the evening. You are going to have to start having probably like a 300-400 calorie breakfast, a 300-400 calorie lunch, a 300-400 calorie snack, and then you could probably get away with a bit of a bigger dinner. It's like a 600 calorie dinner, but you are actually going to have to stick to that, right? What most women are doing is they're under eating, and then they're getting so hungry that in the evening they then go over what would be a calorie deficit, and they're at maintenance. But so they're not gaining weight, and that's fine, but it's still not a healthy approach. Even if you just want to maintain your weight, it's still not the best way of eating, because you're not fueling yourself for your activity during the day, and then you're getting out of control with food in the evening. You've got to spread your calories out. It's not the best way of fueling yourself for exercise, and it's definitely not the best way of recovering from intense workouts, which you're probably doing if you're in this group. Okay, so that's the first thing. If you're already doing that, then there are still some other things that you need to consider, which I'm going to go over in this video podcast episode. But if you're not doing that, right, you cannot build a house on shaky foundations, right? You cannot be in an undereating, overeating cycle and expect to get to the next level in terms of leanness, in terms of physique, in terms of performance, right? You have to fix that first. And that is probably going to require a period of maintenance and getting used to eating enough calories spread out throughout the day, and getting rid of that kind of, food noise where you're thinking about food all day because you're hungry all day and you're being driven by relentless hunger. You have to get out of that cycle of habits first. And that is going to require you doing a period at maintenance of fueling yourself properly. And a lot of women aren't willing to do that. They're like, no, they're too married to their habits, to their crappy habits, and they want to keep doing that, and they expect different results. You're going to have to do something entirely different. And this isn't the only group that that's relevant for. This also happens when people lose a fuck ton of weight, right? So I've often worked with people who have lost like 100 calories from doing cardio and cutting out carbs, right? But then they're stuck and they still want to lose another 50 pounds, but this strategy isn't working for them anymore. So they have to change the strategy and do something more strategic. Normally reintroduce carbs, lifting weights, and just straightforward calorie restriction rather than limiting carbohydrates. So this is just the reason why I say this is because the diet that works for one part of your journey doesn't necessarily work for the next part of your journey. And your ability to switch gears, be flexible, and learn new strategy and eating habits, this is so, so important. Hunger goes up as you get leaner. This is something that people don't understand. They think, okay, when you're heavier, you're going to have more of an appetite. But actually, when somebody has 10, 20 kilos to lose, right, you can get there because they've got a lot of excess body fat, right? Let's say, and they are in a body fat percentage range, let's say for women over 30% body fat, where they do have a bit of excess body fat. Their physiology will be set up in a way that their body wants to get rid of that. That's just excess weight, is excess energy stores that they don't need. And so their body will get rid of it fairly easily. So if you just get them in about a 20% calorie deficit, often you can go further than that and you can do like a 30% calorie deficit. But the more weight you have to lose, basically, the bigger the deficit you can technically tolerate. Now, when I say tolerate, I mean tolerate in terms of hunger. You may not be able to tolerate it because you won't have enough wiggle room to have the fun foods that you want, but that's not physiological hunger. Usually when people have a lot of fat to lose, their physiological hunger is actually quite low and you can get them in quite a deep deficit. Now, what you need the wiggle room for is for the fun foods so that they don't, feel too deprived and then they go overboard, right? It's like teaching them balance. So you kind of sacrifice a few discretionary calories on fun foods in order to get them to adhere to it longer term. Okay, so that's when you have a fair bit of body fat to lose. But when you get down towards 20% body fat, the picture changes, right? Now you no longer have excess fat, right? In physiological terms, you do not have excess fat. For your preferences and our cultural preferences, you have a few kilos left to have sort of the ideal physique. And some people might say that's toxic. Some people might say that that's not. Think what you will. A lot of women want to get to that level of leanness, myself included. And I honestly think it's just as noble a task and just as noble a project or pursuit as just eating more food. I have something like visceral against this cultural narrative that consuming foods and calories that you don't need is somehow, a valid or noble pursuit. I have a problem with that narrative in general. As you get towards like 20% body fat, your physiology will change in that when you have less body fat, your body will produce more of the hunger hormone ghrelin and less of the fullness hormone leptin. And what this means is that you will be hungrier on the same number of calories. So when that happens, like up until now, you've had an 80-20 approach to nutrition, right? Flexible dieting. 80% of your food comes from nutrient-dense, whole foods, minimally processed. And the other 20% are discretionary calories that you can spend on just like chocolate, ice cream, and just having a bit of fun, right? Or alcohol or whatever. But as you get like down towards 20% body fat, that is no longer true. Why? Because your hunger is going to be driven up beyond your calorie needs, because your body is now saying, hang on, we're starting to get down to critically low levels of body fat, and we don't want to be in that position, because if there's a famine, we're going to die. Or if the body gets sick, we're going to die. We need to have these. But in that it was true in our evolutionary environment, but is no longer true in the modern food environment, because we live in such an obesogenic environment and we have so much food around us all the time. So as you start to get down towards those lower levels of body fat, you don't have room in your diet for the fun foods anymore. Why? Because if you eat 200 calories worth of fun foods, you're going to end up being hungry in a calorie deficit. So the 80-20 starts to look more like 90-10, 95-5. There really isn't much room in your diet for the fun foods at all. Now, I can tell you up until, on my own journey up to this point, this like critical point where I just got stuck and plateaued of about 64, 65 kilos. I was having fun foods every day. I was having a bit of chocolate every day. I was drinking alcohol like a couple of times a week. I was not tracking my calories 1 or 2 days a week, and it was just going fine. But to get down below that, and I'm only a kilo down below, let's say 1.5 kilos below, I'm down at 62.9 now. Like, I haven't had fun foods at all this week. I haven't had any chocolate. I haven't had any. Oh, that's not true. I had a very small piece of cheesecake at a birthday party the other day that managed to sort of fit into my calories. But I haven't been eating fun foods regularly at all. And there just isn't room in my diet for them, because if I use up those calories on fun foods, I'm going to be left hungry. Now, this is where we start getting into dangerous territory, because obviously that's considered obsessive, that's considered too restrictive. And I'm, the first one to say, if you restrict yourself too much, it's going to backfire. And this is true. But it's also true that if you want to get down to very, very lean body fat levels, you just don't have room in your diet for this fun stuff anymore. And that sucks. And that's not a message of balance. And I understand why that's problematic for most people. But you have to understand a basic rule of life that is also true in fat loss is there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So in this particular scenario, you can't have your cake and eat it. If you want to get leaner and you want to get very lean, you're probably going to have to cut out those fun foods or find alternatives that are like high protein, low sugar, like maybe they have artificial sweeteners in them. Like, you're going to have to find those sorts of alternatives that are less calorie dense, so that you can get a bit of fun food, something that feels like a bit of fun food, but actually is quite filling and is quite nutrient dense. Now, there might be 1 or 2 of you listening saying, I'm incredibly lean and I have fun foods every day. Great, like whoop-de-doo for you, right? That's amazing, but you are genetically gifted. Like, most people will not be able to do this, right? And that's the kind of bias that we have as well. As we all can think of people that we know on Instagram who are like, I eat fun foods every day and look, I'm 17% body fat. Look how lean I am. That's amazing, but they are outliers and they are not representative of the vast majority of people, right? I am more like the average person, where I can't get that lean without making some sacrifices. And for most people, you are going to have to decide between, do I want to have these fun foods or do I want to get very lean? And that can be really hard on a day-to-day basis, because you can make this decision that you want to get really, really lean, but then when you're tired in the evening and you want to relax with food, that bowl of ice cream or that chocolate bar then might seem like, you rationalize in your head that this is fine, this is balanced, I've eaten really well today, I've done my workout, I've been really good today, I deserve this bowl of ice cream or chocolate bar or whatever it is. And that is true, right? Two different things can be true at the same time. It can be true that you deserve it. Fine. You get to have fun foods. It's okay to have fun food, but it's also true that you are not going to get lean that way. You can't have both. And you have to kind of pick what you want to sacrifice. Do you want to sacrifice the fun foods that you're currently eating in the name of balance? Or do you want to sacrifice the physique that you're going to get in a few months' time if you don't have those foods? And I understand the kind of danger zone of this message, because we say, don't cut foods out. And I'm the first one to say, don't cut foods out. Don't cut out bread. Don't cut out sugar. Don't cut out anything. And that is true when somebody has 20, 10, like that sort of range of a weight to lose and they want to get down to a healthy weight. But the reality is, if you've got this far, 25 minutes into this podcast, you are already a healthy weight. You already have balance to some degree or another. And to get incredibly lean, that requires something other than balance. That requires more sacrifice. That requires less balance. That requires less of the fun foods. And sometimes it requires cutting them out for a period of time to get to where you want to go. That's not a sexy message. That's not a popular message. And it's not a kind of a countercultural message, right? It doesn't fit with the sort of messages of balance and all of that stuff but it's just the reality of things. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. You have to pick what you want. You literally can't have your cake and eat it. Okay, but something else that often comes up is that you do offer, this kind of sounds like I'm contradicting myself, but again, two different things can be true at the same time. Often, you also need to have a higher calorie target, which means a smaller deficit. So, for example, if your maintenance calories are, say, 2,100 on average, I'm assuming that they're that high because you're very active, right? But if you are much small, very small, they might be lower than that. But I'm going to assume that they're going to be over 2,000 calories if you are very active. If you're working out hard, lifting weights like 3 times a week minimum, and you're getting like 10,000 steps a day, that's, that would be what I'd say. If you're not at that level yet, then you probably want to increase your activity to meet that level, and getting leaner without that sort of level of activity is going to be hard. But anyway, assuming that you're at that level, you might be trying to diet on a 20% deficit, right? So around 700 calories. You're trying to do a 20% deficit. Why are you doing a 20% deficit? Because it worked for the last 5 kilos, 10 kilos, right? A 20% deficit works really well for most people when you have like a fair amount of fat to lose. I'm talking about like 10 kilos of fat to lose. And like I said before, when you have a lot of fat to lose, you can sometimes have a bigger calorie deficit. But when you get very, very lean, you can't do a 20% deficit anymore. Why? Because, like I said before, your body starts to register that your fat stores, right, your energy stores are depleted. And so now it starts to increase ghrelin, the hunger hormone, when your calories are too low, right? That 20% deficit, which worked before, now you've got less body fat. It doesn't work anymore because your body's pumping out a lot more ghrelin. It's making you a lot hungrier, and it's inhibiting leptin, which is the fullness hormone, right? So your body will start to register like depleting body fat levels, and so will make you feel hungrier, basically, so that you eat more, so that you don't deplete all your fat stores. So there's often 2 things that you need to do with this. You need to aim for a smaller calorie deficit. So a 10% deficit usually works in this case, right? So you're in a very small deficit. And the other thing you need to do is to eat very filling foods, which is something that we talked about before, but this is where the calorie dense fun foods comes in, right? Because they are not filling. And in order to be at 1,900 calories, for example, and not be hungry, you need all of those calories to come from very filling, voluminous food. So you need to be eating things like chicken, eggs, beef, carbohydrate sources that are very filling, like potatoes, like couscous, and less of the stuff that's more calorie dense, maybe like pasta. You could probably get away with some pasta and bread as well, because they're sort of moderately filling foods. They're not like that bad, but you need to be bulking up your meals with lots and lots of fiber, lots of vegetables, lots of fruits, and you can't be zapping like 200 calories on chocolate that's just not giving you any fullness. You need to use every single calorie to fill you up as maximally as possible. And then that also goes for things like I'm sure you know this by now, but I'm also going to mention some of the other big culprits. And they are things like granola, things like dried fruits, things like crackers, things like nut butters. If you're still eating these sorts of foods on a regular basis, this isn't going to work for those last few kilos. You have to get those very calorie dense foods out of your diet and replace them with more filling things. So that might mean instead of having 200 calories of granola, having 200 calories of bread instead, you're going to be so much fuller. Instead of having a teaspoon of peanut butter, having a teaspoon of seeds instead, right? You still want to make sure you're getting the minimum amount of fat that you need. You don't want to go completely low fat, but you can't be eating these very, very ultra processed, very calorie dense foods when you're trying to get to that extra level of leanness. Then when it comes to calorie intake, there are also some more advanced strategies I'm going to talk about. But before I move on to that, I want to just mention emotional eating, right? So I work a lot with people to improve emotional eating, to improve their relationship with food. But one of the things that I always say to people is that, it is okay to sometimes have comfort food, right? It is sometimes okay to eat emotionally. It's okay to sometimes have chocolate just because you feel like it, or just have something, just have some ice cream just because you feel like that. Is balance, and that can be part of a healthy diet, and you can be a healthy body weight and do that, right? But again, when you get to the point where you're trying to get sub 20% body fat, you can't really get away with it anymore. And so this is where you then have to address those emotional eating bits and the remnants that you might have left of emotional eating. You've probably improved it a lot, and you're probably, hopefully, not binging. As I said before, if you are still, under eating and binging, then you've got a lot more work to do first before you can even consider doing any of this stuff. You've got to get to a more balanced place with food. But if you're eating well all the time, and then you get to the evening, you think, I deserve a treat. I've had a hard day. I'm going to have some chocolate. I'm going to have some ice cream. I'm going to sit. And, you have your measured out portion of ice cream. You have your measured out portion of chocolate, whatever it is. And you sit in front of the TV and you eat that. I think that is healthy. And I think that that's fine to do that. And there's no problem doing that. And you can be a healthy body weight and do that if you're doing everything else. If you are eating a calorie controlled diet and you're eating well and all of that stuff. But again, if you're trying to get rid of those last few kilos and get incredibly lean, you can't do that anymore. What I found, or for me, is that those little moments when you feel like you can have it and you should be able to get away with it and I deserve it, you really have to be like, no, it doesn't fit towards, it's not going to help me reach my goal of X, whatever. And I think that obviously there's like social eating, which is a whole different beast and is difficult to resist sometimes. But there is then the eating on your own in the evening, having a little bit of chocolate here and there, things like that. You've really got to face then the reason why you're reaching for it, like whether it's for relaxing or because you deserve it, or because, you've had a stressful day, you want to de-stress, and you have to find other ways of de-stressing that don't involve eating. So some of the things I like to do, as a mum, I can't just, leave the house or whatever, but often if my husband's around, I might go for a walk or a light jog. I often come back feeling way better, or go have a hot bath or a hot shower and drink, some herbal tea or something like that. I love to do like a bit of a home pampering session, like put a mask in my hair, do like a sort of like, an exfoliant on my skin, a face mask, like something like that, and moisturize my body, whatever, like a body scrub, like shaving, putting like cream on my feet, all of that kind of stuff. Like I like to do that kind of pampering session. I find that very relaxing. And I also like to meditate. I find that gets me in a really great headspace and wind down for bed. But you really, you have to have those other things that you do in order to relax. Gardening's another one for me. Playing the guitar's another one for me. Even just watching TV is another one for me. But you have to be very proactive about that. You have to find these ways of relaxing that don't involve eating more calories. And I find that a lot of mums in general just don't have that. Like their only way of relaxing is either eating some chocolate or something or drinking some wine. And you have to have some other strategies if you want to get down. I think it's healthy for everyone to have other strategies that don't involve food for relaxing and de-stressing. But if you want to get down these last few kilos, you really have to be very, very active about that. Very proactive about that. And alcohol is another one. Again, you can have a very balanced diet and be a very healthy weight and enjoy alcohol. But to get down those last few kilos, you might have to give it up for a little while or only have very small amounts. You can't just sort of go, fuck it, and have 2 or 3. Okay, so then the final thing that I want to talk about is kind of some advanced strategies for dieting and getting very lean. And that involves something called calorie cycling, where you have higher and lower calorie days based on your workout days. So if you are working hard at the gym, you're probably burning around 400 calories in your weightlifting session, right? So that means that if your average maintenance calories are around 2,100, that probably means that, say if you're working out 3 times a week, it means that you're probably burning around 2,400 calories on your training days, and on your non-training days, so on your rest days, you're probably burning more like 2,000 or 1,900 calories. Now, previously I mentioned a 10% calorie deficit based off of your average calorie expenditure. So 1,900, right? Based off of a 2,100 calorie expenditure. But then if you're looking at, like I said before, you can't tolerate big calorie deficits when you don't have much fat to lose. So if then you look at, your non-training day, okay, now on your non-training day, your rest day, you're burning 2,000 calories and now you're aiming for 1,900 calories. Well, first of all, that's not 10% anymore. That's only like a 5% deficit. But then on your training days, if you are burning 2,400 calories and now you're aiming for 1,900 calories, that's more than a 20% deficit again. So now we're back to that place where that's too hard. So then it makes much more sense at this point to have different targets for different days, so that you're in a 10% calorie deficit on training days and a 10% calorie deficit on non-training days. So that might look like 2,100 calories on a training day and 1,700 calories on a rest day, right? And then you're in a 10% calorie deficit every day, because that difference, again, when you've got more fat to lose, your body can kind of buffer that difference, that some days it's more than a 20% deficit, some days it's less. It doesn't really matter. But when you get leaner, that does matter. And so you have to manage your calorie intake much more closely so this is called calorie cycling, right? Where you have higher calories on your training days and lower calories on your non-training days, so that you are maintaining a 10% deficit all the time. So that is one kind of advanced strategy. And the second advanced strategy is utilizing your anabolic window. So your anabolic window is like the 24-hour period after your strength training workout. So in the 24-hour period following your strength training workout, the reason why it's called an anabolic window is because your body is pushing anabolic processes more, right? Okay, so you're in a more anabolic state physiologically. That means that your body is like shunting calories towards building muscle and away from fat storage, okay, and repairing muscle and building bone density and building connective tissue density and all of that stuff. But the workout then triggers a cascade of hormones and all the rest of it that pushes your body towards an anabolic state, okay? And that lasts, if you're well trained, that will last about 24 hours. If you work out Thursday morning, then the period of time at like 9 a.m. until 9 a.m. Friday morning, your physiology is different. You're in a more anabolic state, okay? And your body is going to be shunting calories and shunting substrates towards muscle building and a building of other tissues. So this is another reason to eat more within that anabolic window, right? To eat more on training days, because your body will need more substrates and will need more calories in order to do all of that repair and building. But also, if you eat more of your calories on those days, they will get shunted towards those processes and away from body fat storage. Okay. So it then helps psychologically as well. If you're having these higher calorie days where you can eat 2,100 calories, for example, It helps you psychologically because you're having higher calorie days, which makes it easier. And they're probably the days where if you're going to have some chocolate, if you're going to have some sweets, you want to kind of have it in that anabolic window because it's more likely to get used and shunted towards muscle building and away from fat storage. Whereas if you eat that stuff, or if you eat more calories on non-training days, that's more likely to get stored as fat. But also because you're getting very lean, it's harder to maintain your lean tissue. So you want to be making sure if you're in a very deep calorie deficit on training days, you're going to end up breaking down some lean tissue. Even though you're building some, you're also going to be breaking some down. So you want to make sure that you've got enough calories and enough substrates, so amino acids from protein. You want to make sure you have enough of those to make sure that you are just building muscle and building lean tissue and not breaking any of it down. So again, this is about being more strategic. It's not about working harder necessarily. It's about working smarter. It's about recognizing that I'm expending more calories on certain days. Therefore, I can only tolerate a 10% deficit on those days. And on the days when I'm expending fewer calories, my calories need to be lower. But also, if I make sure that I'm eating more calories in that anabolic window, I get to eat more calories, first of all, and those calories will get used as building blocks rather than being stored as fat. So if you went about it as sort of just a straight calorie deficit of just aiming for 1,700 eat every day, even though there are days that you're working really hard at the gym and burning 2,400 calories, now you're in a massive deficit after your workout and you're just not going to have enough substrates for the repair and recovery that you need to maintain lean tissue. And you're going to end up kind of just spinning your wheels because you're breaking down lean tissue in that period. You're not building it. Calories are not getting used to build muscle and so on and so forth. So this is another example of how you need to be more strategic. You need to work smarter, not harder. A lot of people try to work harder by just cutting their calories even more, and then it just backfires. Whereas by using these sorts of calorie cycling techniques and utilizing your anabolic window, you can then work smarter rather than harder. You can get more calories in and actually lose more body fat. Okay, so I think that's it. I think that's all the things that really need to be said about getting very, very lean. If you have questions, let me know. If you enjoyed this podcast, let me know. Subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or whatever channel you're on. Share this with a friend that might need to hear this, all of the calls to action. And if you do need help with this, because this is hard to figure out on your own. So if you do need help, you need some external guidance on exactly how many calories you need, exactly how you need to train, how many calories you should be having on different days. If you want someone monitoring all of that stuff for you, I have an online program where I work closely one-on-one with individuals and write a completely personalized training and nutrition plan. So get in touch with me. If you're interested in that, we can set up a call to see if it's a good fit. And yeah, that's what I do for a living. So let me know if that's something that you'd like to discuss.